Welcome back, PE, or I guess you could say activities for kids, K through 12 curriculum, but specifically we want to focus on these younger kids. Today, what we're going to cover is principles of physical fitness. These are very crucial things to understand so we know how the body works and what people are truly capable of, depending on their current level of fitness, then as well. By understanding each mechanism of the body, we can better understand how to train people, how to get them to adapt to exercise, and how not to push them past current limits so that we don't have any kind of episode that could rely on further maybe medical attention or something like that, or lead to a bad scenario, an injury or something of that nature. The stuff that we're going to cover today are physical activities, exercises for health and fitness. We're going to cover the basic health components, the 5 major health components, which are the most pivotal portion of this. And we'll get into things like the FIT principle, which is something we can always use to adapt to any person, whether they are a child or adult, for any kind of physical activity plan. So to begin with, almost any kind of physical activity, it really does promote health. Whether you're going on a hike, you're swimming, you're exercising in the gym setting, or just kids playing tag or whatever it may be, you are promoting health, you're promoting activity. Again, like I said before, take the word active out of the word activities, and you're left over with I sit. And that's always not a good thing to have, I sit, because that's going to promote inactivity or a sedentary lifestyle. Now, short periods of intense exercise do not compensate for hours of inactivity. So just because a kid does sprint around for 5 minutes, that's not enough to be considered a healthy lifestyle. We can always go back to thinking about the American College of Sports Medicine here. And we want every person, hopefully, to exercise for a minimum of 150 minutes per week. That's roughly 30 minutes, 5 days a week at a moderate intense activity. Let's go ahead and define some terms right away. So the first term is physical activity. What is physical activity? Well, physical activity, simply speaking, is body movement carried out by skeletal muscles that requires energy. That could be anything, right? Physical activity is me walking over to the refrigerator to get a gallon of milk, technically speaking. Let's go ahead and define another term, though. Exercise. Exercise is planned, structured, repetitive movement intended to improve or maintain physical activity. So it makes sense, right? We're planning, we're structured, we're doing things over and over again to improve or maintain the current level of fitness. And then next, physical activity, it's essential to health, I should say. But exercise necessary to improve fitness? Well, yeah, of course. Exercise is necessary to improve fitness. So we always want to go ahead and utilize exercise if we want to improve somebody's level of fitness. That's the one and only way to do so. We can't just have a sedentary lifestyle and expect us to get better at so on and so forth. Now, by increasing physical activity rate, we can do that over time. That's very important to do it that way. But we still want to remember our baseline numbers, right? So if we want to improve a condition, we're probably going to have to go beyond these basic scopes of practice. So let's go back to that one that I said. Healthy adults or healthy kids, children, should perform 150 minutes of moderate intensity exercise. And this is in an aerobic capacity where they're breathing through the exercises, doing steady state exercises, something that they can maintain over that time frame of 30 minutes per day, 5 days a week, equaling that 150 total minutes. Now, the cool thing is that if somebody can maintain a very high level of intensity, they can cut that time in half. But again, you still have to put in that amount of time and that amount of intensity. So, like I said, 150 minutes of moderate intensity exercise is going to be beneficial, but we also want to go ahead and say that 75 minutes of intense activity is just as equal to that 150 minutes of moderate. But with a child or a younger person, we don't need to go to that high threshold right away. We want to keep them and focus on the moderate and 150 minutes. And as they get older into sports and so on and so forth, that's when we can start incorporating that more intense activity. Increasing volume and intensity results in additional benefits of health and exercise, and we'll get into that a little bit more then too with the FIT principle. If we're going to increase physical activity, we can do it through different modes. Moderate to high intensity resistance exercises, they promote strength and endurance, plain and simple. So doing higher intensity types of running in place, jumping rope, push-ups, things like that, those are some of the basics that we can always utilize. And then later on, as they adapt and get older and stronger and their bones have grown enough, we can start incorporating weight training and so on and so forth then, especially if they're a more sport-oriented person. We want to always avoid inactivity, so some activity is always better than none at all. Now, just to give you an example of maybe like what would be considered moderate to more intense activity, we can start with the less vigorous first. So less vigorous things are basics like, oh, I gotta go out and wash my car, I'm gonna clean the house, I'm gonna do some gardening, I'm gonna rake some leaves. Now we're getting more intense, right? Raking leaves. If we're walking, right, and we're walking fast, and then we're walking briskly, we're doing stairs, we're getting more and more intense with activity. For sporting activities, games that are less active would be considered like volleyball and touch football. But then as we get a little bit more intense, we're looking at 1.5 mile runs, we're looking at bicycling for 5 miles, dancing is very vigorous activity overall. And as we get further, things like water aerobics, swimming laps, playing basketball, these are considered more intense activities, right? More start and stop sports and a high threshold of intensity, I guess you could say. So we can kind of judge based off our own perceptions, right? Or the basics of just common knowledge, what's intense and what's not intense. And a big thing to go by is your breathing, right? And another thing, we'll go about this a little bit later, your heart rate. Just to give you a little bit of numbers, statistics, 66% of Americans carry extra weight. And we're seeing that across the board, whether you're an adult, an adolescent, or a child now. So we have an increasing level of obesity, sedentary lifestyles, and improper care, improper understanding of how we need to use our bodies in general to maintain our level of health, our level of overall well-being, wellness. But we always go back to those basics, right? 150 minutes per week of physical activity is necessary. That's just to maintain. If we want to improve our level of health, we might have to double that number. If we want to lose weight, we want to get our health right. Now, exercise is going to improve a lot of things. Sometimes it depends on the duration, on whether or not we're going to get benefits. But we know that the more time we can put in it, generally speaking, the more our body's going to adapt, and the more health concerns, I guess you could say, the more those health concerns are going to diminish. We're going to improve our level of health, improve our level of wellness. And we got 5 components that we always want to go back to, okay? The 5 components, and I'll touch on this briefly and we'll jump back into it. Muscular strength, muscular endurance, cardiorespiratory endurance, flexibility, and then overall body composition. Okay. The one that we should probably focus on the most would be the cardiorespiratory endurance. Believe it or not, right, we're doing cardiorespiratory activity right now as we speak, just sitting here watching videos. We're breathing, and we're oxidizing body fat. Our body is technically burning calories at any given moment. Of course, as we do activity, our calorie expenditure, or the amount of energy our body requires to use, increases over time with the greater level of activity. So cardiorespiratory endurance, that is our first and primary health-related fitness component. Fitness components, again, health-related fitness components, are physical capacities that contribute to health. So by improving our cardiorespiratory endurance, we're going to increase the ability of the body to perform prolonged, large muscle, dynamic exercise at moderate to higher intensities. And again, like I said, this is the central component to health-related fitness. It's going to stem into every other component of health because we can't just stop breathing altogether. We're constantly going to be using our cardiorespiratory system no matter whether we're walking, sprinting, lifting a one weight that's as heavy as possible one time, so on and so forth. The second portion of those health-related fitness components is muscular strength. Plain and simple, to define muscular strength, it is force of a muscle to produce a single maximum effort. a 1 repetition maximum. We may have heard of this in the past. Technically, muscular strength would be a kid taking a softball and throwing it as far as they can, or a kid jumping as high as they possibly can. These are examples of a single maximum effort force. We don't want to go ahead and take an 8-year-old and say, hey, well, I want to see how much you can bench press today, your 1 rep max. I would never advise that. But I have no problem advising saying, hey, I want to see if you can jump as far as you can. I want to see you jump as high as you can. I want to see you run as fast as you can. These are excellent examples of muscular strength activity for children. Now, with muscular strength, we're using something called metabolism. And I know we've all heard of this probably a million times. But just to break it down, metabolism is the sum of vital processes by which food, energy, and nutrients are made available and used by the body. And generally speaking, the greater muscle mass someone has, the higher rate of metabolism. If you've done some research, which I have done a lot in my past, I was able to understand through reading that the body burns an extra 40 calories per day for every 1 pound of muscle mass increased. So, if you decide to get into a muscular strength and endurance exercise program, and you gain 10 pounds of muscle over a 6-month period of time, now, with that 10 extra pounds of muscle in your body, okay, you're going to be burning an extra 400 calories a day. Because again, 1 pound of muscle gain equals 40 extra calories your body must burn to just maintain that new muscular level, per se. The next component, number 3, would be our muscular endurance component. Simply speaking, muscular endurance is the ability of the muscle to remain contracted or to contract over and over again over a repetitive long period of time. Some exercises would be like jumping jacks, right? Jumping jacks, we do those over time. We don't just do one, we do 30 in a row, 50 in a row. Push-ups, another excellent example, or sit-ups, perfect example of a muscular endurance activity that you can do over time for a certain number of repetitions. And of course, we want to try to increase our number of repetitions if possible. We'll get into the FIT principle more with how we can increase the intensity without increasing the number of repetitions later on. Flexibility is our 4th component. Flexibility is the ability to move joints through their full range of motion. Okay, so a shoulder, right? Good telltale if your shoulder is most flexible is to try to see if you can touch your hands behind your back. One over the top, one around the back. And then flip and do the opposite way. I do this with kids all the time. You want to guarantee that they can touch their fingertips together when they do that positioning. Another thing is, right, standing up straight, can you bend down and touch your toes without bending your knees or keeping your knees extended the whole time? I'm seeing more and more that a lot of kids cannot do this at all, especially as they get into their adolescent years. I had the opportunity to be a chiropractor's assistant for a while, where I was the exercise therapist, and I would see countless individuals, kids coming in for chiropractic care that could not even bend down and touch their toes, let alone even, like, I guess you'd say, their shins. And I was just amazed that this kid is 13, 14 years old. He can't touch the toes of his feet, just standing without his knees bent, just bending over and trying to touch his toes, where I can go ahead and put my palms flat on the ground, and I'm 33 years old. It's like, what's going on here? And it has to go along with what kind of lifestyle are you living? Are you promoting flexibility or not in your lifestyle? Flexibility is something that is hard to gain back. So it's very important from the get-go to be flexible and maintain flexibility so that way your muscles are able to stretch, and then your joints are capable, like it says, to move through their full range of motion. The next component is body composition. That's the 5th component. Body composition, essentially speaking, is your percentage of fat-free to fat mass. And this can tell us a lot about your current health status. What body fat percentage are you? Okay. Now, fat-free mass consists of non-fat components of human body, like the skeleton, the muscles of the body, water weight, and internal organs. Fat mass, strictly speaking, is body fat. Fat that sits just underneath the surface of the skin, which is subcutaneous fat, and then visceral fat. Visceral means tightly attached, and this would be tightly attached fat, different places to like certain organs. Our heart has a little bit of fat on it, the liver has a little bit of fat on it, the intestines have a little bit of fat on it. It's all for a quick energy source at its location. But a buildup of that over time, we know is always a bad thing. We don't want too much fat. We want just enough to be considered healthy. To give you a good percentage of numbers that we're looking at, body fat percentage, we're trying to see about 15% body fat for the average child to adolescent. And then once they hit their adolescent years, body fat starts to change a little bit. Overall, generally speaking, body fat percentage tends to stay the same or even drop a little bit for men or boys. And then for girls, right, since they're going through puberty, instead of testosterone being their primary hormone, they have estrogen and progesterone, and their hips start to widen, and they start to hold on to more body fat. So we're looking at girls into the adolescent years gaining body fat, which is normal, and that percentage can be closer to 25%. So an adolescent, right, boy, 15%, adolescent girl, 25%, adult male, 15%, adult female, 25%. Children, though, ages 12 and under, generally speaking, 15% body fat for each one. We can break down body fat, or not necessarily body fat, but body composition a little bit more if we choose to, just by looking at someone, right? A visual component is a big deal. We can see where people hold body fat. We can also see where people hold muscle. So we can't always say, oh, okay, just because you're heavy means that you're overweight or fat, just like when we did our BMI conversion, right? For me, I'm considered overweight, but my body fat percentage is overall very low. My muscular mass is overall, generally speaking, higher than the average individual. So we can't always judge by just, certain numbers like height to weight ratio. That's why body fat percentage is a kind of, I guess you'd say, an end-all be-all to determining, what is your health status for that body composition currently. We can look at different individuals. Even kids are going to be like this. For me, if I take my hand, I take my middle finger and my thumb and I wrap it around my wrist, I'm able to touch my fingers together. So I'm about an average size individual. That means I have about an average metabolism, average amount of muscle mass to fat ratio. Other people, though, maybe they can't even get their fingers to touch. That's showing that they're more of a shorter, stout possible person or a bigger boned person. They're more likely to maybe have more muscle mass, but also maybe more likely to have more body fat then too. And then lastly, we have people that are more skinny, I guess you could say overall, or long-limbed. If they go ahead and do this same thing, their fingers are going to overlap on each other. That's showing that they are, generally speaking, a smaller individual, a thinner individual. And now we can kind of, I don't know, this is kind of curtailing into something else, but we can kind of see what's more specific to them for exercise. I don't expect to become a world-class bodybuilder because I have long limbs. I'm not overall a very extremely muscly person, generally speaking. I can't be an Arnold Schwarzenegger or a Lou Ferrigno, a humongous bodybuilder. So we have to adapt based off of our own current status or our own genetics, you could say. I know that I can become very muscular to a certain extent. I can lose a certain amount of body fat to a certain extent and be considered healthy. I can adapt and train in certain methods, absolutely, but there's going to be certain methods in which I'm, I guess you could say, predisposed to be good at. For instance, runners, long distance runners. You can't always take a long distance runner and make them a sprinter, right? Because it takes certain muscle fibers that maybe they're not even born with or they haven't even developed yet. Now, there are some other components we want to talk about here, especially when it comes to children, because they're developing these very quickly over time here. They become, these are called skill-related components. And if you look at any professional athlete, most likely they're going to have at least 4 or 5 of these components already in place. That's why they are a professional athlete, why they are at the top echelon of the spectrum. But these skill-related components are going to be great to incorporate into physical activity because, again, it's going to help the kids long-term be able to adapt to other forms of activity, and then maybe it might even help eliminate some sources of injury or causes of concern with exercise. And these skill-related components are a combination of the brain, the spinal column, and then the muscles working in coordination with one another. Over time, the nervous system needs to develop, and I think you've probably even felt this maybe in yourselves. If you've done like exercise, at first you do the exercise, it's very difficult. You're not in much control of your body. Maybe you shake a little bit and you're not smooth with your contractions. Well, that's because your brain is trying to teach the muscles how to do this in a good controlled fashion. So I like to say slow and steady wins the race. If you can do an exercise very slow, under control, your brain's going to adapt a lot faster than you just going fast through the motions. So this comes into concerns with like coordination. Coordination is one of the things we could teach kids right away, like throwing a ball and catching a ball, or jumping around on one foot. That's why things like hopscotch or jumping rope are activities that are great to promote with younger kids, because they're really focusing on that coordination as well as balance first and foremost. And then reaction time. Can they quickly react to that ball being thrown and catch it, or jumping over the rope as it's being swung around over and over again? So we have reaction time, we have coordination, we have balance, hand-eye coordination, we can also say that too. And the other components are going to be agility. Agility is being quick, right? Moving from one place to another quickly. There's power, the ability to just produce all-out force. And then there's speed. Can you get to your top speed fast? That's agility. Versus speed. How long does it take you to get to that top speed, and how long can you maintain that top speed? The human body, it adapts very quickly, and it adjusts to meet increases in demands then very quickly as well. It's kind of like that flight or flight mode. If you push the body to a certain limit, it's going to want to come back next time stronger and better and adapt to activity over time. That's why we can't always say we're just going to do this amount of activity and that's enough. Over time, we need to cause some progression. And that's where physical training comes into play with PE activities. Physical training, simply speaking, is performance of different types of activities to produce long-term changes and improvements in the body's functioning and fitness. So we can make short-term adjustments that lead to long-term changes to improve physical levels. Move my camera there. Specificity is also very important. Specificity in training or physical activity are principles that state that and states that develop a particular fitness component. One must perform exercises designed specifically for that component in order to get better at that component, right? So if I'm somebody who wants to become a better, I don't know, let's say for instance, golfer. No, let's go ahead and say this, sprinter. Am I going to become a better sprinter by just walking everywhere I go or just jogging everywhere I go? Absolutely not. If I want to become a better sprinter, I have to plain and simply sprint. I have to run as hard as I can, as fast as I can. Of course, you're not going to be able to maintain a super long time frame with that, but that's why it's called sprinting. You sprint for a shorter period of time, shorter bouts, but do them more frequently over time. Now, a very well-rounded exercise program should incorporate exercises geared towards each component of fitness: muscular strength, muscular endurance, cardiorespiratory endurance, flexibility, and body composition. But again, specificity is going to be very important when we're trying to gain certain skills or when we're trying to gain certain skills for a game or sport. We can get into progressive overload as well. Just to briefly touch on it, what progressive overload is: training principles that states that placing increasing amounts of stress on a body causes adaptations that improve fitness. And a good way to progressively overload somebody is to have them do a certain exercise for 1 week, say for instance push-ups, and they do a certain number. And then over time you progress by overloading the system to force them to try to do more repetitions than what they could before. This is going to improve fitness, generally speaking. This is going to get us into the FIT principle, and this is going to be the last topic for today. The FIT principle is frequency, intensity, time, and type. So let's go ahead and break down all those things. Frequency is, for instance, how many sessions of exercise do you have per week? If it's a PE class, hopefully they go every day during the week, so that's 5 days a week, right? And for 30 minutes per day. That gets more into the time, but let's just say frequency. The frequency of our exercise is 5 days per week. Intensity, okay, how intense is the exercise? Are we giving an all-out effort? Are we giving a moderate effort? Time. Time is going to be directly inversely related to intensity usually. Usually with less intense activities, we need more time. And with more intense activities, we need less time, or we have less time of sustaining that activity. So time is known as duration. And then lastly, type. What mode of activity are you pursuing? So let's say this is what we're going to do. Push-ups. Okay? Push-ups is our type of activity. Can we do other activities to promote the same kind of strength gains? Absolutely. We could do push-ups on our knees. We could do push-ups on our toes. We can do push-ups with a book bag on our back. We can do bench press instead. So now you're pushing a weight off your body. Okay, these are just the types of doing the same, essentially, muscle action. Now frequency, right? Frequency would be, I'm going to go ahead and do push-ups 1 day a week or 3 days a week for 20 repetitions, for 5 sets of 20 repetitions, with maybe a minute break in between, something of that nature. Intensity is usually how hard is it. So with push-ups, that's one thing, but say for instance it's a bench press exercise. Intensity is how much weight you can lift, right? Or how much weight there is that you can maintain that current intense lifting. Sometimes intensity is better to talk about in terms of cardiorespiratory endurance, like running. So intensity, how intense is that run? Is it a jog? Is it a fast run? Is it a sprint? That tells us a little bit more about the intensity or the level of intensity of the exercise. Time, we got that again. Time, how much time does it take us to do that exercise set? How much time do we incorporate as our rest periods? How much time do we devote to steady state running? And then type back into it one more time, right? We can go back into the cardiorespiratory endurance, for instance. How do we promote cardiorespiratory endurance? Well, we have different types. We have running, jogging, walking, uphill walking, stair climbing, elliptical machines, rowing machines. We can go ahead and say swimming, right? These are all different types or modes of that activity that promote the same outcome, cardiorespiratory endurance. Now, benefits of physical activity are reversible, very much so. You've heard of the old adage, you use it or you lose it. Well, that goes directly into play with muscular strength, muscular endurance, and cardiorespiratory endurance too. Reversibility is the training principle that states that fitness improvements are lost when demands on the body are lowered. So if a person stops exercising, 50% of those physical fitness improvements are going to be lost within just 2 months. So there's that homage right there. You use it or you lose it. You must maintain your current status, otherwise you're going to lower your status overall. Now there are going to be large differences, right, in boys to girls, to age groups, and then based off their current genetic factors then as well. We can't have the same expectations of every single individual, but what we can expect are improvements, whether they are great or small in every individual, especially if they give the effort in doing so. All right, I think that's a great place to stop right now. I don't have any assignments for you, but what we're going to be doing is getting into determining what our current VO2 max is based off of a predicted number. Like I said, I'm not giving you an assignment, but I just want you to think about this and think of a place where you can achieve this. What we're going to end up doing is a 1 mile walk test. We're going to walk as fast as we can at home or around a track, wherever you can go this next week. And like I said, it's not assigned yet, but we're going to try to see what our current physical status is so we can better understand where we are on our spectrum and if we need to increase our level of fitness, maintain our level of fitness, and then we'll be also a better judge of how to figure out how to promote physical activity for ourselves and then for others then too. So stay tuned. I'll be sending out more videos later on this week, and thank you so much. Take care.